Hello and welcome back to the Welsh Gardener, and it's been a while. In fact, I think it's been about 2 months, and today it's very autumnal in the garden since you last saw my video, which was a summer tour actually, I think, or it might have been, I can't actually remember, that's how long ago it was. But anyway, today I'm going to be talking about something that you can do in autumn as things are starting to wind down, and it's mainly just clearing crops. You might want something to change it up a bit, which is going to be how to prepare your greenhouse, like the one behind me or the other one behind me, how to prepare them for winter and for the colder seasons ahead so that they can be used as best as they can, so they're not just an empty space lying there. And if you're new here, then please make sure you go down below, hit the subscribe button as well as the little bell icon to make sure you're notified next time I upload a new video. And as I briefly mentioned just then, it is really autumnal here. The staghorn, or the sumac tree, we call it a staghorn tree because it looks like a staghorn, but the sumac tree is all the leaves are going really bright colours and it's really pretty. And there's not many leaves on any of the trees around anymore, unless they're evergreen obviously. And most of the plants, apart from the winter and autumn stuff, is all dying down. The runner beans here, they're still sort of going there because I'm going to save the seeds to either eat or to plant next year. And actually that's something that I've really stepped up this year, is my seed saving. And then in the greenhouse then, there's the odd tomato left, but I'll pick them today as I'll show you in my video. I'll put them inside and then I'll clear the greenhouse ready to store things and look after the more tender plants over winter. So if, like here, then it's recently gotten a lot colder where you live, then you'll notice that the tomatoes and things that you grow in greenhouses, they may still be green and growing, but the tomatoes aren't still being produced as prolifically and they're not really ripening. So really, you want to get rid of them, clear the space, and you can put things like tender pot plants and different things like that in there over winter to protect them. So as you can see mine, I've sort of let them go into a bit of a jungle towards the end. There's still some tomatoes in there, such as this little vine here, but that's all that there really is in there. The cucumbers already died down because it's a bit chilly for it, chilly as in cold, and then yeah, there's also a nasturtium in there which has grown through the back of the greenhouse and taken over in there. But yeah, so I'll cut everything out in there today, and that's the first thing you can do to prepare your greenhouse for winter, is to clear it out, because it leaves enough room for things like storing things, as I said, in there over winter, and just makes it a more productive space at this time of year because it's so cold, nothing's really going to grow in there. So what I'm going to start off by doing is just cutting off any like tomato branches and suckers, they're called, like that I didn't really want there, and I'm just going to put them in the wheelbarrow to put in the compost afterwards. I'm just slowly taking the plants down so that I can also save any tomatoes then that I want to keep and maybe make chutneys and things like that out of. And tomatoes is a crop that's done really well in my garden this year, and it's because I've grown, for me, a personal best, if you will, of the number of plants that I've grown. I've grown about 12 tomato plants, whereas last year I grew 3, and that's partly helped by being gifted the Harvest greenhouse that's actually behind the camera now. It's a local company to me, and they were kind enough to gift it to me for basically trialling out with automated growing, because all the watering and everything is done in there automated, and I've also got a drip feed system in there now so it doesn't spray and make everything wet. It's more efficient with water now. But as always, it will be linked down below if you do want to check them out. You may also not know that I've put new glass on the top of the roof this year to help the tomatoes and things grow better in here, because it used to just be these windows on the side and they used to go a bit leggy and they never really used to ripen, whereas now it gets a lot warmer in there. And I've got a new thermometer as well that I got for 99p in a charity shop. But yeah, it gets much warmer in there, and I've seen it 30 degrees many times because there's so many windows on it now. And I also grew the tomatoes up string this year because it gives them a bit more flexibility to move, whereas if they're on a cane and they're a bit more, I think they're a bit too supported on a cane, whereas with a string they can move a little bit, and if they do move, then it'll just strengthen them up so they're a lot stronger plants. So this here is how I actually grew it up a string. So I twirled it around the stalk, and the string is actually attached, as you can see up here, to a hook on the frame of the greenhouse. So that's the best way I've found of supporting tomatoes in a greenhouse. So I finished clearing out all of the old tomato plants in here, and now I'm going to speak about the next thing that you can do, and that thing is to mulch the beds in there. Now obviously, having such hungry plants in there all summer, a lot of the nutrients would have gone from the soil, especially if you're growing in pots. So what I'll do is, in these beds, I grew the cucumbers in these pots this year. So what I did, and I've already done, is I tipped them out onto the floor, and I'll use that compost as some organic matter then, and I'll just spread it out and leave it over winter. The worms can do their work, and they'll incorporate it into the soil for me, which is no dig. And then once I've done that, I might put some of these old compost bags on the top, because what they'll do is they'll stop any new weeds growing, even though it'll be slow over winter because it's cold, but in a greenhouse it'll obviously get warmer. So what I'll do is I will put some bags down and weight them down, and then I've got it as a storage space in there. I can put things on the ground. The weeds won't grow, and also it'll keep the ground a bit warmer so I can have an earlier start next year. And it'll also mean that the worms will come to the surface of the soil to incorporate all of that organic matter in, because they don't like light. And if you put those bags on, then it blocks out all of the light, so the worms will come straight to the surface, and it'll all be perfect, nice, rich. I think it's called hummus, isn't it, when there's a lot of organic matter in there, and not the type made out of chickpeas. And ultimately what we're trying to do with the soil is get as much organic matter in there as possible to make it as healthy as possible. So what you want is a lot of organic matter, so it's a bit like a woodland floor, so it's damp but not too wet and not too dry, so just the perfect moisture. And you also want it to be rich in nutrients, which also often comes with having a lot of organic matter in there, because all of the fungi and microbes and things like that all go in there to break that down, and they make these nitrates and different things available to the plants to use. The third thing that you can do to prepare your greenhouse for winter is to clean these windows, because if you think about it, over the summer it gets dry and all the dust and things will spray up when you water, and if it's windy things will blow onto it, and also things like spider webs, slugs trails, things like that. And even here, where I've not been too accurate in painting the greenhouse, there's some paint on the window that could ideally be taken off. So generally just things like that, and just cleaning these windows, and especially the ones on top get really dirty, and obviously they'll get dirtier because they're flat rather than vertical like these ones. And these ends, maybe with polytunnels it might be a bit more difficult because it might be a bit more delicate with the plastic, but I'm not sure on that one because I don't have a polytunnel. But with glass you can just use a sponge or a squeegee or both, or a lot of people use vinegar as well to clean windows a bit. You can get spray that is vinegar and you can spray it on and then just wipe it all down, and it'll keep it nice and clean. It doesn't need to be perfect, but what this does is it just makes sure that the most amount of light can get in there if possible, because there won't be much in winter and the plants that are living in there will need as much as they can possibly get. So you just make sure they're as clean as they can be, so it'll get as warm and as sunny as possible throughout the winter. So one of the next things that you can do, so what I've got is I've got a shelf here that I'm going to put in with these wooden boards that balances on the frame of the greenhouse. And what this does is it lets me store plants in here over winter, because a greenhouse obviously will stay warmer than it actually is outside, and this is great for if you want to store tender plants over winter without them dying. So things like pelargoniums or geraniums you could bring inside, or their cuttings, because they like to be kept at about 8 degrees, but it obviously depends on how hot your greenhouse gets. But these are old bits of shed here that I've got, and they're actually really good for making a shelf here. And that's it done there. And then I'll put some pot plants on there and things, and then the bigger things can go on the sides, like my wormery, which I'm going to put in here to make sure the worms don't get too cold over winter. The first one that I'm going to be putting in, or plant I'm going to be putting in to store over winter, is this, which is a geranium. It's called Fantasia, and it's really bright. I like this one. So I'm going to cut the flowers off when they finish, and I'm going to leave it in there fairly dry. So if you want to store a geranium like this over winter, then you can sort of let them dry out a bit when they start going like this. You let them dry out, and then you keep them at about 8 degrees throughout the whole winter. So I may need to bring this inside again to keep it warmer, but I'm going to try it in there. I'm going to see what temperature it gets to in there. And I could always put fleece or bubble wrap or something over it just to protect it a bit more. So that's the first plant in there. And now for the next one, which is in the same place. This plant is looking a bit worse for wear, I'll be honest. But it is, I'm not actually sure here, let me just read the label. It's an Argyranthemum, Grand Daisy it's called. But anyway, yeah, so I've got a weed there as well. But it's quite, not dead, but it's not looking the best. It's just starting to come back to life. It looked a bit dead in the summer. So I'm going to put that in there. It's still flowering here. And hopefully this will come back to life a bit more in the greenhouse, and then I'll be able to grow it again next year. But I'm not actually sure whether it's a perennial or an annual or not, so I'll put it in there and see what happens. And then I'm going to move my cuttings I've got on the windowsill in there onto the middle part, because that'll stay warmer, because by the window it's going to be colder obviously. So if I put them in the middle of the greenhouse, and that's a good tip, if you want to keep things warmer in a greenhouse, put them right in the middle, because that's where the core of the heat will be, compared to being next to the windows where it'll be a lot colder. So I'm going to move my cuttings, especially some of the geranium cuttings, into the middle where it'll hopefully be a bit warmer. And last but not least, I'm going to be speaking about how you should insulate or heat your greenhouse. And as I said, then I could put fleece or bubble wrap over the plants if they get cold. You can also get greenhouse heaters, but obviously you can try and get electric heaters, a bit like are in Harvest greenhouses behind me that are linked down below. Or you can just go with a normal old paraffin one. I've seen some people do tea light candle heaters, which I've trialled in my Harvest greenhouse, and I personally wouldn't recommend it. It uses a lot of candles for what it's worth. It only does 1 or 2 degrees higher, and it's not really worth it. But what I tend to do, rather than actually heat them, what I do is I get things like bubble wrap from parcels, which is a bit filthy and not the most pleasant thing to touch anymore. Then I get things like that, and I put it over the plants if it's cold, if it's exceptionally cold, mainly in winter. And I'm also planning on buying some fleece, because I don't actually own any proper fleece. I mainly just don't use bubble wrap, but I think fleece would be a bit better. So I'm going to try and buy some fleece to put over my plants in there this winter. But I'll link some fleece down below if you do want to buy some, so that you can buy it for your own garden. And now that I'm back uploading, next week there'll be a new video on another topic, or some tips on how to garden more efficiently and more effectively, and just to get more from your space, and also just to enjoy your outdoor space, because the best thing about gardening is just to get outdoors, get some fresh air, and switch off from everything else in your life. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.